everyone. Welcome back to Innovation Nation today. I'm very excited because I have two familiar faces with us, two people who have both been on here individually, and now we decided to combine forces. So John Harris and Tim Wenzel are here to join me on the next couple episodes that we're going to dive into some really hot topics that are very applicable to today, whether it comes to security or just operations in general as we go back to work. So I'm going to let John introduce himself, and then we'll have Tim introduce himself.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to be back and really excited to have Tim join us today. So for those who haven't had a chance to catch the episodes that I participated in previously, I'm John Harris with Guidepost Solutions, where we do we're a global compliance organization, or global consulting organization rather, working on all types of cool stuff. I won't bore you with the details on my intro. If you're interested, check me out on LinkedIn, Jonathan with an O end at the end, Harris, or check out guidepostSolutions.com and you can check out my bio there. And Tim, how about an introduction for you?
Hey everybody, Tim Wenzel, part of the GSD crew and founder of the Kindness Games. And my two friends here asked me to come on and act like I'm buying their consultation. So it's going to be super interesting to see what they spin out at me. I don't think I'm really prepared for this. So let's do it.
The universe isn't prepared for this, Tim. When I thought about the three of us getting together, I was thinking about, like, it reminds me of Ghostbusters. If you like cross, the lasers, like you never know what's going to happen, and like the world's going to go crazy and people are going to drop out of the ceilings. That's what I feel like. Like we're taking GSE and Kindness Games and Innovation Nation, and we're just crossing the lasers, and man, it's going to be brilliant. So let me set the stage and the backdrop here. So we asked Tim to join us because Sarah and I, on the number of episodes that we've done, we're focused on AI and machine learning and kind of its applicability and impact into the security industry. And we dug deep down into a lot of possible use cases and asked a lot of why not questions. Why couldn't we do this in the security industry? Why couldn't this product be this way? And we had some other folks like Rob Leidick on and walk through it with them. And then we got to thinking, could this, like, would anybody ever buy all this stuff we're talking about? Like, conceptually, it sounds awesome, but would it sell? So that's what brought us to Tim. Tim is in an end user role in the industry, and it's been around in a lot of different roles for a long time, and kind of been on that buyer side of the table. And so that's where we want to take this discussion. And we want to talk about, we're going to start with the concept of biometrics as access control. And it's been around for a long time. The evolution of the biometric from a fingerprint scanner to hand wave to iris to facial and everything in between. And it sounds awesome. You think about it like the early Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies where they're tearing people's eyeballs out and opening up doors with them and such. Like that's what people think about this sci-fi type approach to it. But it really maybe isn't that, like, it's not that crazy. It's not that impressive. And now in a lot of places, it's kind of passé. It's old news. And with COVID, a lot of people have backed away from it because of the closeness that you have to interact with it. And there's the whole privacy thing that we'll dig into. But that's where I want to start. And Sarah, I want to start with you. You live in this area. You operate in this realm. So talk to me a little bit about, let's start with maybe the market's apprehension for biometrics. And let's dig into that first. Why are people afraid of it? Or when you're talking to people and trying to have these conversations with folks, where are some of the objections that you get for biometrics for access control?
That's a great question. It's obviously multi-layered, John. I think what it comes down to is privacy. And I think that often when we've, brought new technologies to the market in our security space, the one who's implementing it, right, whether you're the installer or the user who's the security team, the intent is to protect, right? And then you have the users in the building who, what I've noticed, might just have a misunderstanding or may have their own interpretation of what the technology is really meant for, what it's doing. And when it comes to biometrics, specifically with an access control, we're not used to a technology in our spaces like we are with Apple, right? Apple's a really good example of where they've allowed the users to have the biometric in their hands and control their identity. And so the biggest pushback, I guess you could say, is when it comes to using biometrics is the personal information, what's being taken, what's being surveilled, what's being stored. And then what are you doing with it, right? And then we can always go down the path of, well, if I don't work for you anymore, or if I leave your company, then what, right? And I know we'll touch on that a little bit later when Tim chimes in, but I would say things that just strictly relate to the personal information and what's being done with it has been the biggest concern, or I guess you could say misperception, around biometrics. Does that answer what you were asking or what you're looking for?
Yes, absolutely. So it seems like if I can maybe distill that down to a couple thoughts, maybe lack of full understanding or information, or an assumption that it operates a certain way, or that there's some gaps between expectations and privacy compliance and then the majority of the solutions in the marketplace. Are those fair statements?
Yeah, and I think one thing just to add to that is the use case itself, right? So like how we're using the biometrics and what kind of environment are we laying it into? Is it really just being used for high security applications? Is the biometrics being used for a frictionless, experience in the buildings? With COVID now and all these things, we're trying to find new creative ways to credential our people, right? Like our people as they come back to work and eliminate touch. So of course, biometrics is coming up, using the person instead of using something physical like a badge. So the use case too, I think is often important to consider, because based on where you're going to use it is what then will allow more justification or more understanding. Like if you're going to go put it in a data center, it's very easy for the people managing that data center and the people operating the data center who have a badge to get in would understand why you want to use your thumbprint too, or your face, or your iris, if you're going to do an iris scan. But if you're using it on a lobby to walk through, you might have people say, why are you doing this? Why do I need to do this? What's the point? I can just use my badge to go through the turnstile. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's like two sides of the pendulum or the spectrum that you've just articulated, where biometric for convenience and biometric for high security. And we'll circle back to that because there's a whole in between that I want to unpack a little bit and discuss there. But Tim, bringing it back to you, do you see use cases within your operation, whether it's on the security side or just like the corporate employer side, day-to-day employee activity side, where either you're currently seeing the application of biometrics specifically for access control, or you intend to use it or would use it? How do those use cases that Sarah talked about resonate with you, or do you have other concerns that maybe keep you away from adopting it either now or in the future?
Well, there's all sorts of use cases for why you would want to use biometrics. And, it's funny because a few years back, when you would go to ISC West or GSX, maybe 5 years ago, and they had the hand wave things, they had the technology that did facial recognition and your gait, right? And they were kind of selling one fact that, one, you don't need to issue cards. Two, people aren't going to lose the cards. It's hard to lose yourself. Most people don't lose their face. But three, it was cool. And now we live in a different time just in the past 2 or 3 years with the rise of GDPR and the California Privacy Act and things like that, to where cool can get us in trouble. There are a lot more regulations about what personal identifiable information is and why you would need it, how you store it, et cetera, and how you destroy it, right? And so, the interesting thing is when we think of access control historically, or actually, if we go back to I get a job, well, there's certain personal information that I have to give my employer because one, they need to report on taxes. Two, I do want to get paid. Three, I expect benefits. So just those three things, there's a certain amount of engagement that they can say, this is who Tim is legally as a person, so that we can make that connection to our organization, get these things done. Well, they can take some of those things and put it in an identification management access control environment and issue me a badge, right? And that badge is company property. It's not my property. I have to give it back when I leave. But there's nothing really personal on it. It's just like a number that gets swiped, and it's like, that number is Tim. And if you want to take into a higher security thing, you can have a screen where it pops up the photo that's on my badge and be like, yeah, that looks like Tim. I remember when I was first a security guard, they didn't swipe them. They just showed them as they walked by, which was really low security. So when we go from that to well, here's what a company would ask. Why would we want to have people's fingerprints? Or why would we want to have an image of the face? And you go back to Apple, right? So, or a lot of phone manufacturers, actually, not specifically them, but it's convenience. I'm already using my phone to hit the button, my thumb to hit the button. So it makes sense that I can just leave it there for a second and it opens my phone. It's way easier. But what the phone manufacturers have done is they have taken a broad, it's not your actual fingerprint, it's not your actual face, it's a picture, a representation, a diagram that you can't actually break back to identify a person. It doesn't work that way, right? Like, they can't say, hey, whose iPhone is this? Send it down to the crime lab and pull the fingerprint off of the device and see, because it's not the actual fingerprint. Whereas in security products, you start to get a lot closer to the actual fingerprint or mapping of the face or mapping of the iris, because we are using it not to open the phone, but to identify a person, right? And so especially if you're new to corporate security or you're trying to sell this corporate security, you really do need to get the use cases dialed in, because somebody's going to have to engage legal soon, and really help them understand why we need this. Convenience, probably not going to cut it very much these days, depending on the technology, right? Because the more, I'll say, forensic that you get to say that this is an actual representation of a biometric that can be used to identify somebody, the more confidential and controlled that information has to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things I want to pull out of that. I'll start with the ending. Well, when I was working for a large corporation similar to yourself, it was right in that, like, when I was moving out and moving into the service provider part of the industry, GDPR just was coming. And so any software of any type that we were going to be using, and we were doing this for visitor management software, it had to go through a 415 question PDP or GDPR assessment. So privacy was, and it wouldn't even be like, and that was like a 3-month vetting period just to get it through privacy. And this was back in 2014, 15. I think GDPR dropped in 16, and kind of that compliance period up through 19. So, so that's what you're talking about, is that there's this broader stakeholder, and I think the bigger your company gets, the bigger that stakeholder list becomes, right? It used to be maybe just security could purchase their solutions in a vacuum. And if you're doing it at a facility level, maybe that makes sense. But for like enterprise level solutions that most corporations, and that these kind of solutions probably make most sense at scale, because that's where you're going to get the value of them. You really got to think through all right, the IT person, so IT security and cybersecurity and InfoSec. Obviously the physical security person is kind of your that's table stakes. Is it going to work for them and fulfill their needs? But then privacy and legal and then the employee population.
Right.
Is the general employee going to say, yeah, I'll do this? And then you brought that up a little bit, right, too. Like, are they going to say, yes, I'll let you use my face?
And so you have to make it make sense, right? So like a while ago, they had the hand wavy thing for access control. And there was kind of some discussion like, well, is this like an actual biometric that you can use outside of the system to identify somebody, right? And then the thing was, it was cool. You didn't need a badge. You generally don't lose your hand, and it was quick enough for a lot of medium traffic turnstile like type companies and lobbies, right? To get people through. But now, exactly, why would I give you a biometric? So you almost either have to have a company that has a high tolerance for checking new things out, or you have to have a higher security application that says, yes, this makes sense. But when I leave, I give you my badge back. Like, how do I get me back from you? And that's another thing that kind of has to be addressed, because that's one thing that not only employees, but regulators and GDPR, there's the like forget me clause. Like when I leave a company, like they're like, I own my information. It's portable. I have to be able to take it with me if I request it, right? So you can't take it and keep it. So how do I know that I'm getting all that back? And they're interesting questions to answer as we check out these new technologies.
Right. So, and from your perspective, right, if you're looking out in the marketplace and you're saying, all right, I'm gonna do some new stuff with access control. We're doing a new. I mean, a lot of stuff. Often I'll see, we're doing a new headquarters, or we're going to do a center of excellence for X, and so it's got to be like, the budget is bonkers, and we can go nuts and put some extra stuff in there that we wouldn't usually do. And a lot of times that's where these showcase technologies come through, and then they make their way back through the organization as people say, we want to be like that cool place. And so that's where we see it coming through. And so, some of the stuff gets kind of glazed over or bypassed because of, the glitz of it. But, so Sarah, you're dealing with this day in and day out, right? You're living in this industry, like the sub industry, this biometric access control kind of subset of the security industry. So what say you to some of those topics that Tim is talking about? And are there in between solution sets that you kind of approaches, we'll say, we'll kind of stay away from specific technology, but maybe we can talk about approaches to like each one of those stakeholder conversations. We don't have to go into great detail, but maybe like the privacy and the IT security, kind of look at those buckets. And then in general, like how do you manage the potential employee objections of, well, I don't want to give you my face, my hand, my eye, or we got to make sure it's gone when they want it to be gone.
Yeah, really good points and questions there. And I think it really comes down to one big thing, at least from, my experience, having been an integrator for, some time, who would, bring the solution, right? And aside from consulting, because really, you, John, as the consultant would kind of help them figure out what path they're going to walk. And then when I'd come in and install, often we were involved in the credentialing, enrollment, as it gets deployed, right? And the most common things that would come up, and now today as well, is the concept of opt-in versus opt-out. And it's very important because traditionally, with the technology we've had available to us, whether you're the consultant, end user, or integrator, it hasn't been an opt-in scenario. A lot of it's been very cookie cutter. You are an employee, you get a badge, you go out throughout your day. We're putting this device in to do this kind of technology. You don't really get a choice, right? I mean, this whole concept of GDPR and the reasoning behind it and why Europe led that and And what we do with it is really to protect the users, right? Not the user who's buying the system, the user who's actually at the door using the system. And I think traditionally, just what we've seen is that you have a lot of this technology today that overlays onto a camera, for example, right? And that's a very much surveil opt out scenario where you're going to have analytics run through camera streams and people in the building don't get to choose whether or not their face is getting scanned. I mean, bottom line, you go into any building, you're going to see cameras. And as a human, that owner of the building has every right to monitor what's going on in their building. They own the building, that's their asset. They have to protect their asset. Now, finding a way to bridge the gap between protecting your assets and then also protecting your people is, I think, what our biggest challenge has been. And so, where I'm going with this is that I think that the real answer is having the solution and having the way to let your people opt in, give the option, right? You could use your badge or you can use your face if we're talking convenience, right? If you're going to go and have a high security area, I actually think there's not much negotiation there. It's obvious that when we're in data centers and when we're in critical environments, the users who are even in that industry, the lab techs, the IT guys who opt in to even work into that industry know that they're in very high security areas. They know that everyone needs to know who they are and where they are and why they are wherever they are, right? But when you're going, let's say we work at Google or we work at Apple or we're coming back to work, we're an Amazon employee. If you're trying to give your people convenience to come back to work, you have to make sure that you're going to give them the option.
So
Does that make
and
sense?
that's a really good point. The opt in, opt out, and returning to work touchless, right? That's
Yeah.
important to a lot of people. So one thing that I've done in the past, or that I've seen organizations do, is like, one, you need to test out the new facial recognition thing to see how many people you can push through. So um, send out a company-wide thing. And this is the technology we're looking at. This will get rid of your badge. This will do these things. Who wants to help us test? You have to work in this building, enter through this lobby most of the time. We need you to make this many lobby entrances per week, so that we can test traffic flow and stuff like this, right? And so often you have the more engaged population in your company, like, oh, that would be cool. I would totally do that. And you can kind of let them know how it works, what is expected, what information they're taking from you, or PII, and what you do of it. And then the people that sign up, you can give them surveys during it. What do you think of the experience at the turnstile? How fast does it work? What concerns do you have at the beginning, midway, now that you've been doing this for a couple months, about your information? What questions are you getting from other people? And you can grab that, and then through some sort of announcement, Q&A process, if you have a company-wide thread that you can distribute information, you can continue to put this information out, engage what the adoption may look like, right? So some people will always still want to do badges. You'll still need to, probably, depending on how your facility does, have visitor badges anyway. So you're always going to have some sort of a scannable area. And not everybody will opt in, but you may be surprised at how many people do opt in. And if you make it easy to opt out, that's also very good.
Tim, there's one thing I want to touch on that you're saying, because you're bringing up a really nice point, and the idea of piloting and testing and kind of letting the users, the people in the building themselves, make the decision for the owner, right? And show them, hey, this is actually going to give you a really nice experience. You don't have to worry about remembering your badge every day anymore, or whatever it is, right? You don't have to use it to present to the door, whatever it might be. I think, though, what's important to recognize is that I think the biggest challenge our industry has had, though, is that the technology itself, like the actual tech that we have in our tool belt, didn't warrant or allow an opt-in in the first place, right? There's very few solutions that give you the button to store a photo or to not store the photo. The way a lot of the designs behind technology today that we've seen over the last 20 to 30 years that we still use every day didn't allow for that flexibility. And like card readers today, if we were to really take a step back and think about card reader technology, that is not evolved. That technology has been the same technology for 20 plus years. But you go look at cameras and you go look at everything else, and there is so much, evolution around that tech. And I think the point here is like, we need to be designing the technologies and these solutions to not just benefit the person buying it, protecting the people, but the people in the building themselves. Does that make sense?
Well, let me jump in there because I'm gonna go like way off the reservation for a second to pull us back, but hang in with me.
Yeah.
So when you think about what's the like, and Tim, you brought this up in the beginning, and I got my start as a security officer way back in the day, and even doing fire watch in my military days, right? Like you stood there, someone came in, they showed you your badge, you look at the badge, look at the face, said, looks close enough, come on in. So you were the card reader, literally reading the card, right? Okay. So then we took that and we put it into a device that was then going to read the card digitally, doesn't look at the photo, but it validates that the bits and bytes on the card match the bits and bytes that have been programmed into the computer system that's managing an access control system, right? So, and the door either opens or doesn't. So the use case there is the job of the card reader is to unlock the door, validate identity, unlock the door. So let's think about the phone. So communication device, right? I need to talk to somebody. Eons ago, I sent a carrier pigeon, and then eventually we figured out how to communicate over wire and transition my voice to bits and bytes that you can hear on the other end. But think about what my iPhone does today. I verbally communicate on this the least of anything I do on my phone. I probably have an actual phone conversation, right? This is over Zoom right now, so this doesn't count. A real phone conversation once or twice a week, maybe. So the whole value proposition of your phone is no longer audible communication. It's all the other stuff. And so let's bring it back to entering a door, securing a building, right? Because that's what the access control will do. But to your point, Sarah, it feels like that's just like, the whole, it doesn't have to still be a hard line. I don't need to do the rotary dial anymore. I can go a whole different way of securing that door and then wrap a whole bunch of other stuff around it. Where the actual like securing of the door becomes a collateral benefit of all the other stuff now that I'm adding to it. So, now what my phone does for me is it allows me to order food. It allows me to order groceries. I can pay with the same credential that I use to open my phone. I can pay for things. I can book flights. I can buy a car. I can basically do anything I can think of through my phone. So when you look at how we secure a building, I think like our imaginations need to be unleashed a bit more to the capability of how we can be doing that. And let's get back to that high security versus high convenience thing. If I was told that in entering a building, that my face was going to be utilized as my entry ticket to get in, I could also use it for all these other beneficial factors that I get along with it. And it's a benefit to what you talked about, Tim. That's what my employer is giving me. You give me this, I'll give you all this. And that when I put that balance next to it to say, well, I already used my face for all this other stuff. And we're going to get into the privacy and control thing in a second and kind of maybe wrap around that concept. You give me your identity, which you already give me because I take a photo of you. So I have your photo because we put it in all of our employee communications and it's all there. So I have that. I'm just going to use it to let you in my building. And then you're going to be able to do all this other stuff with it. Like I think that's not too far of a stretch to take. But I think the challenge is, and you talked about this, Tim, capturing my identity and holding it. And so I look at the opportunity and the way the technology is going now, where I can actually, instead of loading the photo in, I can use a combination of technologies like the card plus learning your face with machine learning and AI. So I'm multi-sensor reading, and maybe your gait, like you said, Tim, like learning things about you. So it's a progression over time. It's not I capture your face, I load your face, and now I'm scanning. Whenever somebody walks up into the field of view of the camera, I'm scanning it against a database of faces. I think there's a different translation technology that I want to get into around automation and machine learning, and that opt-in thing we talked about that reduces both, I guess, increases the convenience factor and reduces that privacy concern and challenge and issue. So, on that vein, Tim, what are your thoughts there around are we way too far apart? Is saying, going from dial-up to cell phones just apples and oranges, or do you feel like there's some sort of congruency between those two themes?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually perfectly reasonable, right? It's just that when you look at a new technology that is going to take you down this identity path with all of the new regulations and the way the world is thinking about it, you really do just have to dial in that value proposition. Why is this worth it? Why is this a benefit? Is it convenience? Is it touchless? Is it high security? And you're absolutely right, Sarah. I think you said that if you're in the part of the industry that's used to getting your fingerprint read, in addition to a PIN code and a badge swipe, like you're used to that, it makes sense. And so really dial in and help your customers dial in the value proposition, right? And then you have to, as a manufacturer, make the legal review so easy. Like really find out what every company is going to need to know to see if this is policy compliant, if we have to make a new policy for this, how defensible is this, and just lay it out there so that we can get the information there and get it done as fast as possible. That is the biggest barrier to entry for a Fortune company right now is, does this add or reduce risk?
Right, absolutely, and I think that's the entry level question whenever you're looking at any technology, any security technology, and specifically identity technologies, is what is that risk versus reward equation and value proposition, and what's our exposure? Like if we lose some, like I have a company that I've worked with who, Illinois is one of the states that has a GDPR-like regulation on the books, and an organization I work with, we actually went in to do a site assessment, and when they have a high control area, they wanted to find out ways to better control, but have high convenience. We're like, facial recognition for authorization. They're like, not a chance, no way. We're a part of a legal action for using fingerprint scanning for things, and we're like. This was to the security manager I was talking about. We can't even talk about biometrics. Like it's like a 4-letter word around here. Not going to happen. So you also have to know that landscape is there already something that they've stepped in and they're like, nope, no matter what, I don't care how compliant it is, never going to happen here.
And that's a great point. And so if you're a consumer looking at this, do your homework. As you're doing your homework for technology, do your homework with the organization. And I think as security professionals, we often overlook the benefits of pre-socializing with the right stakeholders. Here's the problem. We need to solve for it. Our current solutions are not meeting the mark here, here, and here. Here's our roadmap. Here's where we need to get to. So we are going to begin looking into these types of options. and let the mini freak out happen before you've done anything. And then, engage. What would it take? Why is this a problem? So many people, it's funny. My last boss, she and I got along great for the most part, but I used to drive her crazy. She would be like, Tim, this thing just happened. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Why is that a problem for you? And she would be like, are you not a security professional? I'm like, I'm not your caliber security professional. So like, I know why it's a problem for me, but I need to know why it's a problem for you so I can deliver you the right information and outcomes. Like, who are you talking to? Oh, you're talking to legal? I'm not talking to legal. You're talking to these people. You have to deliver this report. Great. I can help you with that now that I understand why it's a problem for you. Ask those questions and lead those conversations. That way you can actually gauge what the appetite may be, what things need to happen to make this go. And all of these things are things that need to be considered. They're not usually insurmountable. You just have to work at it.
Yeah, it's a great point. I love the way you position that question. And why wouldn't this work for you? And that's how you get around those hard no's. When you ask someone, would you do this? Like, can we do biometrics? No. Right? Don't ask the yes or no question. Why wouldn't you? Why would you be opposed to biometrics as access control? Because it's a totally different discussion that one would have. So I'm going to shift gears here slightly and kind of come to an end on this, because I think this is a broader discussion that I think we can tackle in a single session. So with Sarah's approval, we'll roll into a second session on this to dive into the next part of this. But what really compounds, I think, the opportunity for this technology going to the next level is the automation, the AI, and the machine learning. We talked about it a little bit earlier, the ability to utilize, because if you're hard coded in and you have to save a bunch of stuff into a system, you're increasing your privacy challenges and issues, the more data you have to own and operate. But with automation and machine learning and some of the like edge operations that could happen outside of your security software system, it feels like that's where this thing is really gonna take a quantum leap, and where humans don't have to be involved as much. So again, thinking back to already the evolution from a security officer visibly monitoring you and you showing your photo badge till the same security officer monitoring you, you run your badge, a photo pops up on their screen and they go, yes, 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 to now doing that virtually, to now removing the security officer altogether, and then now rethinking that credential to card reader, to panel, to controller, to software, chain of events. Feels like to me that whole system is ripe for disruption, and that it can be pulled out and replaced with all types of different stuff that would really make this a more rich process and less manual and probably more opportunity for compliancy to reduction of PII capture and some other things. So we'll go there for a second, and then I think we'll pull this one closed for now. Sarah, I'll start with you, and I'll come back to you, Tim. Sarah, from your interactions in this, are you seeing a appetite? Like let's say we've talked to all the people in Tim's organization, privacy's bought off, they're all in, we're good. Let's do biometric for authorization for access. But now we got to go from point A to point B and that whole in between. And today it's a lot of manual. Are you seeing folks implementing the automation, implementing the machine learning? How is that playing in the field, and how do you see that evolving and changing over time?
Yeah, it's a loaded question though. It's a good segue to our next part of this series, because I think what it comes down to is, first of all, there's a couple different ways that you can use the tech, right? Whether it's just straight AI, you take it to deep learning, machine learning, and all those things. I think um, it really hits different components of an ecosystem. So it hits the area of the credential itself, it hits installation, it hits user management, how the user's actually using systems. And I would say that we already have a lot of AI around us in life. Today, you have AI everywhere, whether you realize it or not. And in security itself, the most common AI at the lowest level that we see is video analytics, right? You're taking an algorithm, you're running it over a video, and you're identifying things in that frame. And you're using a computer to do it, right? You're teaching the computer, you're having it operate like a brain. Um, so I'd say within biometrics, access control, obviously I work at a company that's doing that, but it does exist and we are getting more traction and I am seeing more technologies pop up. Now, when it comes to privacy, that's a very different story. And how it's being used on the privacy front is also a different story. But I think that we're just starting to hit the revolution of it. I've seen a lot of articles where they're talking about the fourth, industrial revolution beginning. It's kind of cool. So I think it's definitely something we'll bring up in the next call, in the next discussion we have.
Great, thanks. And then Tim, from your perspective, do you see AI and ML having the same gag reflex as biometrics for authorization practice? Like, is it that same kind of boogeyman feel to it sometimes? I mean, it seems like it's less prevalent in the industry today, whereas biometrics have been around and being used for 15 plus years and in different parts and outside of the industry and in. Whereas machine learning, I think, is really prevalent in certain industries outside of security, a lot for video. But how do you feel about it as a potential purchaser of it? Not just as it pertains to the potential uses around biometrics, but just in general.
I think it's a discussion that we should all be having because it is not new, but it's a new buzzword, right? People are still hearing it and not understanding what is AI versus machine learning versus deep learning and all this stuff. So if you are interested in this, again, start educating yourself, understand what it is and why it would be helpful, and start educating your shareholders or your stakeholders. Start reaching out to them and letting them know what you learned. And do you think we might be able to use this to tackle this problem or that problem, and engage in a little bit of brainstorming with them, right? Do a little thought leadership and help them understand what could be. And then, depending on what buy-in you get for either of this, you have to launch a project. So just because the powers that be said you could do it doesn't mean that everybody that has to be involved in the project will buy in. So that's probably one of the next conversations we should have, is how to sell the project.
Yeah, great point. And shameless plug, if you want to get really smart on the differences between AI, machine learning, deep learning, the nuances to it, and how it affects the security industry, go back and look at the first episode that Sarah and I did together on demystifying our AI and ML in the security industry, because we lay it all out for you. And then great point, Tim. I think where we'll head, we'll see how things go into the next session, but we'll definitely put a bow on this at the end of our discussions. Is now you got approval. So let's like take a step back and set the stage. Now we've got you peaked. Tim is interested and he's like, all right, I'm in, I want to learn more. And so the next thing we're going to talk about how AI fits into it. And then we'll carry that discussion on to talk about, now you have a project approved, but can you go do it? Can you execute it? And what does it mean to take this new technology, whether it's biometrics, facial recognition, AI, ML, what have you, and make it work in your organization? Because that's a whole different objective. And Tim, I bet you and I have some war stories around successes, failures, near misses, kind of all types of projects that we've done over our career that did not end up the way we originally anticipated it. So with that, Sarah, I'll hand it over to you. You can close this out here, and I look forward to continuing this discussion on our next session.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank both of you again for joining us. I think it's going to be fun. I love where we're going with this. Everyone's getting back to work soon, and like Q3, Q4 is what I'm noticing right now is what's getting planned out, and we're going to see a lot of change. So I think it's important we keep talking about it and keep bringing it up and learning and doing what we can, and not just educate others, but educate ourselves. So once again, John and Tim, thank you. You guys are the best. Really loved having you again, and we will see you next time. Thank you.